I'm here with John Kneale, and I'm going to be interviewing him about his book, Volcano Rising. Just before doing that, a couple of minutes before John arrived, an old friend, Jacques Dufault, came by with his goddaughter, who's interested in joining Foreign Affairs. And I had three pieces of advice for her. First, of course, she should be reading John's book and finding out how exciting, how demanding, but how fulfilling a posting can be. Second thing, she should be patient. Currently, Foreign Affairs is being somewhat targeted in the sense that there hasn't been any hiring in 3 years. The budgets have been cut back very, very drastically. Promotions and so on are not coming. But it won't last forever. Sensible countries realize they must have, in their own interests, an effective foreign service. So the second thing is to be patient. And the third thing, I'd suggest that she read Paul Heinbecker's book that came out 2 years ago called Getting Back in the Game, which gives a longer-term picture of the possibilities and the importance of working in foreign affairs. John, tell me, why did you write the book?
Well, and Brian, thank you very much for doing this interview and giving me a chance to talk about it. This is the second in a series of 3 books about the Foreign Service. My first book was called Foreign Service, published in 1993, and it discussed the Foreign Service in somewhat general terms, i.e. how does one join the Foreign Service, how do you get in, what's the work like, and so on. But then also had a more individual side as I described 5 postings that I'd had up until that point, including a brief period in Tehran during the Canadian caper. And in each case I discussed why Canada has representation in that country, what sort of work does the embassy do, what did I do. There were some humorous bits as well. So that was really an introduction to the Foreign Service. The book is still selling and is still very popular with people who are interested in Canada's international relations and in the Foreign Service itself. This new book, Volcano Rising, An Ambassador's Diary, is in some respects a sequel because it focuses on one single country, Ecuador, in South America, and it focuses on the role of the head of mission, specifically. But it also has that broader approach in the sense that it describes all of the activities of the embassy, the trade work, the political work, the consular work, the aid work, and so on. And tries to show that in a country like Ecuador, there are a lot of Canadian interests at stake, and that even a small embassy in a small country can do some really significant and important work that advances Canadian issues. So, as I said, this is the second book. There will be a third one in a year or two. And it will carry the narrative a bit forward. But all 3 of these books are about the Canadian Foreign Service. They're not academic. They're really, I hope, good reading, some funny parts, some sad parts. But it's really an effort to educate and inform interested Canadian readers who don't know much about the Foreign Service.
Mm-hmm. And John, what's the significance of the title, Volcano Rising?
Well, during the 3-year period that the book covers in Ecuador, in Quito, which is the capital and where the embassy is, we had an actual volcano erupting over our heads, literally above us. it looms over the capital city of Quito. And for a long time, the volcano was going up, and then it would sink back, and it would rise up a little bit more, and there'd be an orange alert, and then it would sink back again. Ecuador is a country that has 22 active volcanoes, and quite a number more inactive ones. But this one actually did finally explode. And in the book I talk about what that looked like and what it felt like and what it did to us. It covered the whole city several times with a layer of sticky, nasty ash, and it causes enormous problems. But the title is also a bit of a double entendre, because much of my work while I was there involved the indigenous people. Ecuador's population is about 40% indigenous, aboriginal. And they're not integrated into the modern culture, and they are constantly seeking a better share of the nation's wealth. And so during this same 3-year period, 1998 to 2001, the indigenous movement disrupted the country completely on several occasions, and actually contributed to the overthrow of a democratically elected president, working with the military. So the title, Volcano Rising, also refers to this indigenous movement, which, like the inside of the volcano, it keeps coming up and then subsiding and rising a little higher and then subsiding, but which one day could really erupt and create significant disruption in Ecuador and potentially in other neighboring countries too.
Mm-hmm. John, the format of the book, how did you want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, the title is Volcano Rising, an Ambassador's Diary, and I added that bit because that really tells you what the format is. It's literally, and it was written as a diary, not every single day of the 3 years that I was there, but whenever there was something significant to report, I sat down and put it into my diary, usually writing early in the morning, so I was fresh but able to recapture what had happened the day or the few days preceding. But I thought when I came back to Ottawa and sat down and looked at this manuscript and was wondering how to format it, what to do with it, that the diary format is pretty good because it maintains a certain level of interest. In other words, I don't have one chapter on the indigenous movement and another on our trade issues and another on something else. Because life happens all at once with things jumbling into one another, the book in diary format shows just the multiplicity of issues that the embassy had to deal with. And sometimes we were dealing with 2 or 3 problems at a time. We had a kidnapping of 7 Canadian pipeline workers in the Amazon. And at the same time as we were struggling to manage that and rescue these men, we were dealing with the volcano and indigenous protests which were blocking the street and bringing the economy to a halt, and negotiating a trade deal all at the same time. And so the diary format, I think, conveys or tries to convey what it's like to be in an embassy and to really have to grapple with all of these problems at the same time. The book is a little critical of a number of parties, of the department in Ottawa in particular, as was the first book, Foreign Service. There's an edge to both books because I continue to feel that we're not as well supported when we're abroad as we should be. And so I call a spade and say what I think is wrong with the department and what could be done about it. But I don't let those issues override the main story. Really, I'm telling what I hope is a compelling story that will interest people and give both Foreign Service people and their families and friends, but also people who don't know much about the Foreign Service, a really clear idea of what life is like on a day-to-day basis. How challenging, but also how fulfilling.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting in the book too, John, that you work in periodically background history of Ecuador that was a good idea.
Yeah, I thought, because most people in Canada don't really know much about Ecuador, if they know anything about it, it was important to give a little bit of historical background and context so that people could get a sense of where this country came from and where it's going to. I developed a great love for Ecuador. It's a fabulously beautiful country, and the people are really wonderful. But it has had great problems with its governance and administration. There's tremendous corruption. Governments succeed one another rapidly. It's very difficult to get any kind of serious work done with the government because people change constantly. It's a very frustrating place, but it probably always has been. And I tried to show with some of these flashback sections how the country's history has always been rocky and a little bit like that volcano going up and down.
John, just sort of in closing, why don't you tell us a little bit more about this third book that's in the works?
The third book, which, as I said, should be coming out in about a year and a half, contains a number of articles that I published in Bout de Papier, the PAFSO magazine, over the last 10 years or so. It stitches those together, but it also will have quite a lot of new material, some of which I think will be of interest, again, not to specialists or only Foreign Service people, but to a general audience. I want to try and place the Foreign Service in a broader national context, so that people will see that whatever it might be as a career, and it's a fabulous one, as you know yourself, it also has real importance for Canada. We're a country that has to deal with the whole world because we're not a superpower. And to deal with the whole world, we have to have a trained corps of professionals who know how to deal with the world and can collect information, analyze it intelligently, make policy recommendations to the government, and advocate on behalf of Canada when they're abroad. So the book will not be focused exclusively on a country or a group of countries, but we'll try to put Canada in the broader international context. So that one should be along in a little while, and I'm going to call it Red Passport.
Red Passport. Okay, John, well, I hope that when you're finished we can do this again.
That would be lovely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.